Hi everybody, welcome to this latest webinar on this series that we've been running since last week on the DataApp project. My name's John Franklin, I'm Head of Safety Promotion here at EASA, and I'm just going to kind of give you a little bit of the logistics before I introduce my colleagues and the team from the project, and they can get into things. So just from a practical perspective, the system itself, the session itself will be recorded, and the recording will be put on the event page so you can access it from there. In terms of follow-up, also the PPTs and things will be made available through the event page also. And then just in terms of interactions, we have Slido set up. So if you go to the bottom right hand corner of your screen, you should be able to then find the Slido for the Q&A and all of those kinds of things. So you can see then the questions and answers and be able to raise questions that way. If you have any technical problems, please drop me a message in the chat and we'll do what we can. But certainly what we found is if you have any sound problems, the best way to try and solve those originally is to try and reconnect with a Chrome browser. Certainly seems to solve most problems that we have. So that's the basic logistics. I'll hand straight over to my colleague Guillaume Aigouin, who's going to talk you through the technical part of the presentation. Guillaume.
Hello, thank you very much, John. Indeed, my name is Guillaume Aigouin. I'm a senior flight data expert at EASA. I've got a few very small number of slides to introduce the topic for you. What is in the scope of today's presentations is a case study that is part of a research project supervised by EASA on digital transformation case studies to prepare the evolution of aviation standards. Quite a long title, so we call it actually the DataApp research project, DataApp. On this case study is on data models for enhancing the use of flight data for safety. So now to give you a bit more of a context, DataApp is a research project that is under the aegis of Horizon Europe Research and Innovation Program. It is also tracked by an action of our European Plan for Aviation Safety. The European Plan for Aviation Safety is an overarching plan to manage safety at the EU-wide level. And the volume 2 of this document contains all the actions that EASA and the member states, with the support often of the industry, have committed to do. This plan is public, and so you can consult it. And if you look for an action called RES.0046, you will find actually that this very research project is tracked by this action. This research project started in December last year, and it will last until 2024. Now, what is the objective of this research project? It's really to investigate opportunities and challenges that are brought by the digital transformation in aviation, especially with regard to connectivity, to greater automation, to virtualization, to the use of big data. More specifically, in this research project, we want to assess possible changes to our aviation standards, to the way we collect data today and the way we manage safety. We also want, if possible, that let's say the first stones for a roadmap to changes to our airworthiness, flight operations, maintenance on training standards are led. We also want with this research project to start building a knowledge basis on possible solutions, on options for the future to cope with the digital transformation, and associated to these possible options and solutions, what would be their impact on operations, on working processes, and of course on our standards, and of course the economic impact. If you want to have more detailed on the objective of this research project, the specifications and so on, there is a dedicated web page on the EASA website. So I've provided the link here, but it is really easy to find which is the keyword EASA research DATAP, for instance, and you will find it. Now, I need to also explain that we are going to focus on a small part of this research project, because it actually includes 3 lots, and we are only going to look at one part of one lot, which is dedicated to data science applications. And it's a case study called Case Study 5 on data models for enhancing the use of flight data for safety. So what it is exactly about? Basically, the idea is to go through 4 steps. The first one is to investigate data models that bridge between flight data sources, flight data monitoring programs, FDM programs, and safety relevant processes for the operators and, more generally speaking, for the aviation industry. Then to investigate current limitations, current challenges to implementing, to developing such data models, such as the lack of standards in the domain of flight data monitoring, challenges that operators are faced with to obtain and to maintain sufficient knowledge of flight data monitoring to run an effective FDM program. And also challenges to make really the best use of flight data for managing safety. Then we would like to identify some so-called options and also to analyze their impact. Options are not only new technologies or new products. This is a concept that also encompasses new industry standards, possibly new regulations, new concepts, new ways, let's say, to promote a better use of flight data. And the impact, as I was saying before, is the impact on operation, working processes, standards, and also economic impact. And finally, we also would like to investigate how to use in combination flight data and training data, especially in the context of evidence-based training that has been introduced recently in our regulatory framework. To help how to help better assess the effectiveness of training programs, and also to see how training data and FDM data could be used together to better help assess what is observable in behaviors and competencies. So these are basically
Guillaume, sorry to interrupt. It seems that the slides do not go along with your speech. So
okay.
Can you check that?
So on which slide are you left?
The first one.
So I can see the slides changing here.
Okay, not for me. Is there a question in the group as well? And
understand. It's a bit strange because I have the
So
I don't have the
you should
feedback.
be on slide. Are you on slide 4? Does that?
I'm on slide 4. Yeah.
Yeah, that's what I see on the screen here. Do you see slide 4?
I don't.
Okay.
Can somebody perhaps slides? Okay, so we have at least. We also we have some people saying it's okay, and some people. So it's certainly most of our audience seem to be on slide 4. So I'm not sure. Maybe people who only see slide 1 can maybe update their browser and, as in refresh their browser and see if that works. Okay, I've got lots of slide 4, so let's continue and
okay.
Hopefully it's just a small thing.
I'm very sorry for those who are left on slide 1. Of course, it's easier with a slide. I don't know. Maybe we can share the content afterwards.
Yeah, so we will share the presentation afterwards anyway.
Okay.
So that's good.
So, and yeah, if it's let's say. Just, in fact, this was my last slide, so you haven't missed too many slides. This was a short introduction. And now I'd like to give the floor to Nuria, who is the manager for research program. And Nuria, I think you will also introduce the rest of the LG team. So LG being the one who has been selected for conducting this research program. Nuria, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Guillaume. Welcome everyone to this webinar. I am Nuria Alzina, principal at ALG, leading the practice of digitalization and advanced analytics. And we are implementing this research, as Guillaume mentioned, on behalf of IASA. Today, together with me, I have on my right Antonio Cabeza, the technical lead of this project. And then on my left, I have Carlos Cuesta, who is the main researcher, senior consultant at ALG. Also, we have online connected Andrada Bujor, who is the team leader of the research program, who in this case will not so actively participate today on the webinar, but will help us manage questions and answers mainly. Okay, so what are we doing in this research project? Basically, the digital transformation, as we all know and we all see in our day-to-day life, let's say, and as well on the news, is advancing very, very quick. And we need to make sure that we keep the pace on other areas of our business with this transformation, mainly to make sure that we are not losing opportunities. Also considering the fact that aviation is, well, we need to keep the safety levels very, very high. That's why the industry itself is quite regulated and we base ourselves a lot on standards. We need to as well help these two areas make a push to make sure that they do not cause barriers to the entry of these new solutions, digital solutions that can help us overcome the main challenges that we have nowadays in the operation, considering, for example, the ramp up that we had after COVID, as well the climate change and all the pressure that is in our industry on behalf of the environment, etc., etc. So we need to make sure that we combine all the different pieces that we have so that we can keep the pace with digital transformation and make the most of it. So that's what we are trying to research in this project. You will have here the link to the data project website that you will afterwards be able to check offline. What we are focusing on in this project, aviation is very big, so we are focusing on three main areas. On the one hand, we have the two first case studies, one dedicated to EBT, CBTA, and the other one on digital fuel management. Those webinars took place last week. If you're interested in those topics and you missed these webinars, you can see them on the YouTube channel. If you enter the website of the project that I've shared at the beginning, you will be able to recover them and have a look at those. And today we will focus on the flight data models for safety. So in any research project, we start always during a certain amount of weeks analyzing the state of the art. So what do we have right now? What issues do we encounter and how can we initially solve them? What is it in there that we want to actually research? In this case, we conducted this literature review on FDM in particular, seeing what papers and also the regulation, what did the environment tell us about FDM. And then with that, as well, the initial solutions that we find on the market that could solve us in the challenges that we have. In this case, we define a set of initial case studies, and we started what we call the development of the case study that was mainly focused on having a set of interviews with multiple stakeholders on a 360 perspective, mainly that we're covering operators, authorities, and as well providers of software and certain associations or companies that have something to tell us about FDM. And with that, we gathered an initial feeling of the main challenges that the industry is facing on this topic. Those, or well, a limited set of those, let's say, will be the ones that we will be discussing with you today. Please take this as a preliminary results of what we have obtained from this set of interviews, okay? But as you can see, we are in the middle of the research. The research is still ongoing. And that's why today we are here on this webinar, and we would like to hear your opinion, your feedback on the challenges that we will be presenting you. It's very important for us to gather as well this more wide feedback of the industry to the challenges that we will be posing, and as well, have we missed anything? If we missed some important challenges that you think are relevant, please as well contact us and let us know, and we will include it. How will we gather this feedback? On the one hand, through the question and answers, you can as well leave your comments or messages there. As well, you will have our contact details. So if you feel you want to contribute much more to the research, feel free to contact us, and we will be more than happy to have a chat with you. And as well, we will gather in a more systemic manner your feedback through a questionnaire, a survey that we will publish. You will have the link at the very end, where we will ask a set of questions regarding those challenges presented, so that we can, as mentioned, gather this feedback in a more systemic manner. As well, as Guillaume mentioned, our objective is not just to identify challenges, but as well to start identifying a set of solutions. And we will as well use the questionnaire to start a discussion on potential solutions and what is the feeling of the industry on how this should be tackled. Okay. So basically, what is next? Once we finalize this webinar, the interviews that we still have ongoing, and the questionnaire, we will set or propose a set of solutions. We will evaluate the impact of these digital solutions, because we do not want to propose solutions just for the sake of proposing digital solutions. We want to propose and recommend solutions that actually add value to the industry. And finally, we will present or compile a set of recommendations, mostly focused to regulators, that they can do to streamline and foster the implementation of this digital solution. So how can they help the different key players in our industry in streamline these solutions? These recommendations can come in the form, in many forms. One of them might be additional trainings, guidelines, other webinars to discuss particular topics that may be relevant, collaborative programs, etc., etc. Okay. So now, finally, before we enter into the matter, I would like to thank the different stakeholders that helped us in this process so far, that they dedicated a part of their time to have these interviews with us and give us their feeling, their feedback, and their challenges that they were facing on the different topics. So now I will leave the floor to Antonio, who will introduce the different challenges, and Carlos, who will actually provide us the actual preliminary results that we obtain on each of these challenges.
Thank you, Nuria. Good afternoon, everyone. Good morning. My name is Antonio Cabeza, technical lead of the data research project LOTS3. Thank you to the 96 people connected with us today. We really appreciate your time, and thank you for your participation. So, as Nuria has explained, today webinar we will examine the challenges and limitations in the context of the flight data analysis monitoring premise, the so-called FDM in Europe, flight operations quality assurance, the focus in the USA, and the challenges faced by aviation stakeholders for the effective implementation of this premise, but as well at the scaling, translating towards the scale-up use of this premise outside the FDM premise itself. But before digging into details, I would like to set up a little bit the context of our discussion, the status and maturity of FDM. So FDM programs have been running for a long time now, and I do believe that the industry has already realized about the unique source of information that we are talking about and the value. It provides it's a unique source of aircraft information and as well around on the surroundings of the aircraft. In fact, there has been an unprecedented growth of FDM data that is being generated, that is being recorded, and organizations recognize its value as an asset, and have progressively developed means to secure, to store, to analyze, to process, and disseminate as well this valuable source of information. Of course, the baseline use of FDM data remains under the FDM promise, which is the regulatory baseline, let's say, mandatory for most of the commercial aircrafts, for commercial operators, those with aircrafts above 27 tons. But nonetheless, the regulation, as Guillaume has pointed out before, is progressively contemplating the use of FDM outside the FDM promise. For instance, in the context of contextualization of scenarios for evidence-based training promise, FDM is recognized as an important inner loop data source, or as well as an important source for developing field advanced models for individual field schemes, for field reduction initiatives. So what's the technical challenge ahead? Later on, we will further discuss in a few minutes, but we could say that while years ago the challenge was at the decoding, we have a limited sample of data and we want to gather insights from this limited sample of data. Now the challenges or new challenges arise, which are more on we have a vast amount of data and we need to be able to actually store and beyond that process this data in a way that gives us useful insights. And as well, of course, enriching this data with other contextual sources. So we're speaking there about data fusion, and do all this within a secure, data-defined environment. We're speaking about a very sensitive source of data. So as the technical challenge diversifies and grows, so it does the industry. We've seen that in the interviews and as well on the test research. There are many vendors and products that are pushing, let's say, the boundaries of the technological capabilities. And by way of example, new cloud technologies are being adopted by many vendors as part of their service portfolios. So with all this, which are the challenges that we have identified in the context of one-to-one interviews and as well test research? This is just a summary groups of challenges that we've identified. Some others have left aside of this webinar due to time constraints, but will be well captured in the report that we are preparing. So the 5 challenges are the usage of data frame layout, the transition to cloud-based softwares, then the definition and implementation of FDM events, fusion, as I've mentioned, with other data sources, and finally, we will deal with data governance, to be more specific, 2 subtopics, access policies, and integration. So having said that, now I would like to welcome Carlos, who, as Miguel explained, will guide us through the actual limitations. Carlos, welcome.
Hello, Antonio, and thank you everyone who is attending to today's webinar.
So let's start with the first challenge, the data frame layout. So for the vast majority of commercial aircrafts, flight data is recorded and stored according to ARINC 717 standard. Other aircraft may use the ARINC 543. The new ones may use the 767, right? And all these standards, however, old or new, make use of the so-called data frame layout. Data frame layout, logical frame layout, data frame has many names. At the end, we should understand this as a custom set of instructions used for the collection and decoding of data. So what does this data frame layout do? Basically, it governs which sensor is stored. It detects the position within the data frame of where each parameter is stored, let's say. And then it determines how the collected data is converted from engineering values into binary and back again from binary into engineering values. This set of instructions, if we can explain it in a very generic way, is divided into 2 different files and 1 set of documentation. The configuration file, which is the file that controls the collection process and is stored within the aircraft, is provided by the manufacturer, let's say. Then the manufacturer documents this collection process with a set of documentation more or less detailed, and the manufacturer provides this set of documentation to the operator. And the operator forwards this documentation to the vendor.
Right.
And then based on this, the vendor produces a new file, which is the one governing the decoding process. And this file is stored in the FDM software.
Exactly.
Okay. So with this more or less generic high-level explanation of the process, Carlos, which are the limitations here?
Right. Here we have divided the limitations into 3 different subjects as well.
Okay.
First one is, let's say, matches the part of the utility of the usage of the data frame layout for flight data collection within the aircraft. Second one regards the management of the data frame layout for decoding, so for decoding purposes in the FDM software. And finally, we wanted to touch upon how operators of aircraft for which the FDM program is not mandatory, how do they deal with that situation when trying to perform or to, let's say, to conduct an FDM program, right? So on the first one, on the customization of the FDM, of the data frame layout, we have that, let's say, given the recent expansion in the number of parameters that are being captured by the flight data recorders, operators have decided and have stopped using the direct access recorder, which was a piece of equipment that they could configure themselves in order to record data. Why? Because, again, as the flight data recorder has expanded, all the data they need is already being recorded there. But this change has resulted in the usage of the flight data recorder's data frame. And only manufacturers have access to the technology and the expertise required to customize it. Thus, operators are limited in the customization of the data frame because the cost of contracting such a service is high, because the time to perform it is also long, and because they are, in the end, subject to the disposition of the manufacturer to perform the service itself. So there is a blocking point on how the operator can customize it. But there is another point, the fact that some aircraft use older versions of the ARINC standard, and those versions, or those data frames, record less data per second than what is now being used across the industry, which is 1024 words per second in general. So operators who have those types of aircraft using older ARINC versions see that they can only capture or they can only record a smaller number of parameters than others. And this presents, in addition to issues when trying to perform an FDM, or trying to conduct an FDM program, this is an issue when they have to, let's say, manage or, let's say, govern how or what data is being captured, if they are using data for FDM, data for fuel management, data for maintenance, etc. And also, for those parameters that are recorded, there is worse performance in terms of frequency and resolution. This whole problem, while it can be resolved, you could say, oh, we can directly update the data frame to a newer ARINC and there's no problem there. The fact is that there is, because retrofitting an aircraft with a newer ARINC version can be expensive, or it may not even be possible if the manufacturer concerned does not offer that possibility. So there are operators face a significant number of limitations when trying to customize for collection purposes. Now, on the part of the coding, here we see that the documentation on the data frame that the manufacturer provides to the operator is not machine readable. Again, it's a document. Literally, it's hundreds of pages of PDF or text files. Thus, in order to decode that data that the operator is capturing, it is necessary to develop the second file that you commented, the decoding file. And to do that, you need to perform a very exhaustive process of data entry and validation from the PDF into a logic or software system. While such a task was manageable in the past and has been the industry practice up to this point, the increasing number of words per second, again, as I commented, we are evolving to capturing more data, is a problem as the workload to perform this whole data entry and validation process has increased a lot. This itself results in 2 problems. First, for operators, it represents a barrier to accessing the flight data because they generally lack the tools and expertise to produce such a decoding file. Ultimately, they need to subcontract this work to a software vendor, and that results in high costs for the operator and long waiting times until the decoding file is produced. On the other side, on the side of the software vendor, they have to produce these decoding files, which requires additional expertise, additional tools to those from their main product offering. They may be experts in fuel management, but they have to learn how to decode flight data in order to be able to offer their product. And while this decoding process it requires a lot of work, again, it's work extensive, it does not add much added value. So we have a problem for software vendors. And this whole issue is further complicated by the fact that there is a wide variety of standards on how documentation is being produced and how it is redacted. Operators have generally a high number of data frames because factors such as different engines may require for the same fleet multiple data frames. And finally, by the fact that there are missing channels of communication between those software vendors and manufacturers in terms of when they have to share information on the coding on the documentation side. So while it depends case to case, some manufacturers may be more open, some software vendors may have direct connection with people with key people in manufacturers. There is no, let's say, common channel of communication, and generally the operator has to work as an intermediary between one and the other, which adds additional workload to the whole process. Also, and as far as we've seen, there is more or less a general issue of operators not being able to exercise, let's say, the ownership over the decoding file to its full extent. What do we mean here? Software vendors generally produce the decoding file in a proprietary format, and they charge the operators to do so. But given that this is a proprietary format, operators are not able to decode or use the, let's say, the decoding file by themselves. They need to pass through the vendor for any usage, any decoding processes. So if they want to perform any decoding, let's say that they have an FDM program, they want to perform any decoding by themselves, they cannot without going through the vendor. Additionally, and this is another problem, operators are not able to share the decoding file. Again, it is using a proprietary format, or they may not even have access to it. So not being able to share the decoding file with a new software provider means that they either require an agreement with their own provider to give it to the new provider, they have to pay for a new decoding file every time they want to change providers, and it can become, let's say, a barrier to centralizing the codings. That is, imagine an operator that wants to use flight data for different purposes, FDM, fuel, airworthiness. If they want to have a single team within their organization that is tasked with the coding, and then that team share that information, that decoded data with all the other teams, the fact that they do not have access to the decoding file is an issue there. Such centralization would, for example, improve efficiency, reduce costs, and ensure that there is a unique truth, let's say a unique truth for flight data within the organization, so that different decodings do not bring different results. Finally, I'm going to the third topic, the one on aircrafts, operator of aircraft for which an FDM program is not mandatory. Here, the main issue that manufacturers in general, given, and it is totally comprehensible, that the FDM program is not mandatory for their aircraft, they are less experienced in the usage of flight data than bigger aircraft manufacturers. Thus, they may capture parameters in the data frame that are not relevant to the operator, and they have, in general, less mechanisms to consult and adapt to the needs of the operators, and that is a problem for operators. This issue is further compounded by the lack of equipment for operators in order to properly perform an FDM program. Generally, they have very few equipment available, very few suppliers for each aircraft type, because it needs to be certified, and many of the aircraft that they may acquire from a manufacturer will probably not be factory ready or factory equipped with a quick access recorder, which, as everyone knows here, improves the efficiency of performing an FDM program a lot. So in such cases, the operator may need to acquire new equipment, may need to retrofit an aircraft, but it is very expensive, given a particular type of aircraft. If it is not mandatory, generally we're talking here about business jets or very, very small regional aircraft. So operators that generally do not have the capacity to exploit or to perform an FDM program given those limitations.
Okay, so overall limitations can be summarized very briefly. End user, the operator lacks the expertise to configure to use the data frame, and then requires the help from the software vendors and as well the manufacturers. And these, the manufacturers and vendors, at the same time, are limited by technical and organizational barriers, as both the Link 717, as we said, have some limitations. And on the other hand, as far as we understood in the interviews, neither vendors nor manufacturers currently have, let's say, an incentive to share information. There are some huge investments, and there is a need to find the right balance between individual or, let's say, private investments for development, as well the required level of knowledge to efficientize the complete stream. Okay, so with this, let's move on with the next challenge, which is the transition to cloud-based software. This is a well-known technological shift. You may have experienced this yourself in your enterprise software. For the past several years, enterprise software, which includes FDM software, and other flight data products have shifted from in-house solutions, those that reside in the operator servers on premises, to cloud-based solutions that reside in third parties, so in the vendors. And this shift in technology has been accompanied as well with a shift in the business model. So we are going from a license, let's say, to a service, software as a service.
Right.
Okay, model. So why so? We can differentiate two perspectives. For the big operators, they need to process bigger volumes of data. So processing capacity of in-house servers does not allow to efficiently, let's say, exploit all the data that operators generate, which keeps growing as newer fleets modernize and there are more parameters, more data. By way of example, if we need to rerun a particular event algorithm for the complete historical, most in-house capabilities do not provide this capability,
Right.
or if they provide this capability, it will not take a reasonable amount of time. And in that situations, of course, cloud solutions which can scale better, they provide a flexible, let's say, processing needs, which can be activated and deactivated as per requirements, and do not require, let's say, a huge upfront investment. And for smaller operators, a similar rationale at the end, it's all about simplicity and as well cost saving by using software as a service. Such solutions offer tools to perform, let's say, the complete FDM workstream without significant upfront investments, without developing, let's say, extensive expertise in the coding, in definition of events, and sometimes even the SaaS providers provide some packages to support the data analysis. So some experts providing support to the actual FDM team on the operator. Concerning this topic, Carlos, which are the key limitations?
Right. Here we have three let's say, subtopics of limitations, which follow the same process that an operator would go from an in-house solution, transition to a cloud-based solution. In particular, in the case of cloud-based solutions, we want to focus on the software as a service model and the limitations that it faces in the context of an FDM program or in the context of the usage of flight data in general. Regarding the in-house server solutions, first and foremost, we have the aforementioned limitation of data processing capacity. So software that has been developed for in-house is usually in general less flexible when adding additional capacity or additional processing power than a cloud-based solution. And that is a problem that operators face when they have to process huge volumes of data. Vendors also have problems with these solutions because when they want to, let's say, update, they want to maintain, they want to configure, perform any kind of modification over the software that has already been deployed to the operator servers, they do not have access. They may not have direct access. They will have to coordinate with the operator's IT services. So that becomes a problem. And finally, as operators and vendors switch from, let's say, legacy in-house solutions to cloud, the legacy in-house solutions will be increasingly and progressively deprecated without receiving updates, without improving capabilities. And as more and more capabilities are exclusively developed for cloud, operators may be forced to switch if they want to keep with the analytical pace of the industry. So there will be a problem in terms of having two paths of development for one type of software and the other. In the case of transitioning to a cloud software solution, we have here, first and foremost, the same problems that any operator may be facing when they try to switch between providers in in-house server solutions. So that is the cost of performing the whole process and increasing workload. The cost comes from the fact that they need to pay for a new decoding file. They may have to configure new event algorithms. They may have to modify everything because the new software uses a different programming language because the previous one was maybe proprietary, etc. And the second, the increasing workload comes from the fact that, they have to perform all this process while they need to maintain the FDM programs functional. So they will usually keep both software solutions in place, the previous one and the new one, until they can perform the full transition, and they need to maintain both. So that becomes a lot of work. Additionally, they must train in a new system, they must adapt it, they must validate all outputs, etc. So it's a lot of work. And finally, during this whole process, operators may lose some continuity in the FDM program. That is, the analysis of trends can be impacted if they cannot, let's say, translate or modify the event definitions that they have been using to the new system. That may happen because it is not economical to transport from one to the other, because the new provider does not allow it, or because the previous provider does not allow it either. And finally, in the case of software as a service, we have that the software as a service model predicates on the continuous delivery of a service. So that's basically the model inside. Instead of selling you a license, we sell you a continuously delivered model. But such a system is not always compatible with the tasks that need to be performed to work with flight data. For instance, the production of a decoding file that we have commented already is an infrequent but very expensive task. And in that case, either operators have to pay additional fees on top of the continuing service, or the vendors must absorb the cost. So there are some issues there on how to fit one with the other. Also, and depending on the vendor, operators may lose visibility over the decoding and computation phases of their FDM programs or any other usage of flight data. While this is not an issue by itself, operators want their results, really. In the case of FDM programs, it can become, or it can result in a significant shift of knowledge from the operator, where it resides currently in general, to the vendor. And this can result, on the one hand, on operators or the ultimate safety decision makers losing analytical capacity, and on operators facing even more difficulties when trying to switch between software vendors.
Okay. So we've touched a little bit the data collection part, now the software itself. Let's move on with the event definition and documentation. As we all know, FDM programs are used for detect exceedances, deviations from the flight manual limits, from the SOPs, good airmanship, and to that end, the standard practice is to use specific algorithms, the FDM events, to detect deviations or precursors to specific events. And this definition, the theoretical framework there is to allow operators to define their own events. At the end, we want the events to be a mirror of the operational reality of the operator. But this results in different definitions for the same event across the industry, a challenge when it comes to define new events that I have not addressed before. And as well, I need to have a solid knowledge and internal documentation process to keep track of these changes in my event definition. Very briefly, concerning event definition, what do we identify here?
Right. Here we can separate the fact that event definitions are not standard and the fact of when we have to define a new event. On the first topic, on the problem of having event definitions which are not standard across the industry, we see that operators, if they try to benchmark their event rates, their trendings with those of other operators, they must either assume a degree of error when trying to compare one or the other, or they have to perform as is done in large data exchange programs such as the Data for Safety. They need to have a second set of events, and both require additional work. So the fact that we have non-standard definitions signifies that the utility of performing a benchmarking exercise is decreased or it's reduced a lot. Additionally, operators, if they try to share information on best practices on FDM with others because they are more open or they want to share their expertise, their experience with the rest of the community, they may see that effort being less efficient and less effective because, again, the applicability of their own situation, of their own event definitions is not very high with other operators. So they may be less willing to share any information, any knowledge, knowing that it won't be of much use to other operators. Regarding the definition of new events, so the other part, here we see that operators face difficulties when trying to define these new events because they do not have enough reference information or industry best practices. So while this is currently being addressed already, publications from the European authorities, FDM Forum, European Operators FDM Forum are already addressing this particular limitation. It still partially remains because they cannot cover the whole envelope or the whole scope of FDM events that can exist. So operators are still facing these difficulties. And what happens there is that an operator may decide, given those difficulties, that a vendor-provided definition is a more efficient process than trying to define it by themselves. And this can result, in the end, in a more, let's say, hands-off approach from the side of the operator, which may limit their understanding of the event logic. In addition, if the vendor is not, let's say, open about the definition itself, and it can become a liability if in the future they decide to change software vendors. Finally, regarding the point that you commented on the internal documentation, here we see that the main point is that there is a risk on the side of the operator of losing knowledge and understanding of the rationale behind a particular event definition or its implementation as time passes. Why? Because there may be rotation of key personnel, there may be simply forgetting from the part of the teams at the operator. If there is no proper procedure, it is a problem that must be addressed. And it is also a problem in terms of the limit on the number of events that, let's say, a team can manage. If there is no documentation, again, for the aforementioned reasons, you cannot maintain a high number of events because you will not know how to manage it. You need to have a proper information structure.
Okay. So we've covered a little bit the analysis, so the events. Now, what about fusion of flight data? We acknowledge the value on flight data, but of course, these providers, despite its value, it only provides a limited vision. Its value and utility can be further augmented if we try to enrich fuse this FDM data with other external contextual sources, including weather data, METAR, flight crew reports, or for instance, operational data such as the flight plan. Why so? Because we can use this for event definition, more accurate and reliable definition of events, and as well to contextualize our analysis. I do know that most of this fusion is already on the minds of a lot of FDM managers in Europe. So concerning fusion, what are the limitations there?
Here we have 3 main topics. On the one part, we have the fusion capabilities that the software that any operator may be used is providing. We have the access to the data source, and we have the format of the data. So regarding the fusion capabilities, we see that many software solutions are still very, let's say, they're a bit green on that side. They incorporate very limited fusion capabilities. And these usually include weather data and runway data, but not farther from there. So operators using legacy software may not even be able to fuse data through their FDM programs, and they will have to develop those fusion tools in-house. On the access to the data sources, we must say that it is not easy. Collecting data is difficult for both operators and vendors, as data sources may not be public, so they may not be able to access it through an API or similar technology. Access to the data may be obtained only through fees, so paying fees, which may be big or not. And the data may be limited in scope. So, for example, it may refer to a single region, to a single airport, etc. And they have to capture data from the whole situation, or let's say from different vendors, in order to have the whole picture for their own processing functions. But even once you have resolved both topics, the end of having the capability and the fact of having access to the data, there is a problem with the format of the data. Why? Because it is not standardized. And this impacts both the technical fusion, the technical process, and the utility of the data. The technical process is affected because multiple data sources for the same type of data may use very complex or proprietary, let's say, definitions or formats. And working on there is very expensive. So again, you may need to discard part of the data based only on the format because you don't have access to the let's say, again, similar to FDM, you do not have access to the decoding. On the other side, on the utility of the data, it can be impacted if factors such as the resolution of the data, the frequency, the information captured, or any other such topic is affected by the format. For example, that some data is not being captured for a specific format that is captured for another. So in that cases, it may not even be worth it to use any data because there is it doesn't resolve the needs of the operator.
Okay. So let's move on to the final topic, which is data governance. At the end, data governance is a set of principles and processes for data collection, management, and use of data. At the end, the goal of data governance is to ensure that the data is accurate, is reliable, consistent, and available for use, while at the same time protecting and ensuring its privacy and security. And this is very key in the context of the TMF shop. So having already covered let's say, the processing of data and collection of data, we'll focus here in the management, let's say, and we are going to address 2 different subtopics, data access policies and then integration of data across software solutions. So data access policies, at the end, operators need to develop data access and security policies to restrict information access to authorized personnel and prevent, let's say, unjustified disclosures of crew identity, of course. Each operator with their own flight crew representatives, as per their own organizational and communication means, they need to define an access policy that best adapts to their organization. Given the diversity, this comes with different limitations that we've seen in the context of the interviews.
Exactly.
Which are those? Exactly.
In the case of FDM and other uses, let's say the main one is that software vendors must adapt the offering of their products to the access policy of each operator. Okay. While many vendors already account for such challenges, and they have already defined, let's say, flexible software solutions which can adapt, this is still a very limiting factor in some cases. For example, let's say a data access policy which requires the operator to store flight data only on the company's servers. So any sort of cloud transition is already blocked. But it is not the only problem. This is not only a problem for vendors, because operators will also be met with resistance from flight crews when trying to share flight data, when trying to work with data and particular uses, etc. In general, we can conclude that many current access policies are not developed for usage of flight data beyond FDM. They have been defined with FDM in mind, and that is impacting the other uses. And neither unions nor operators were ready, let's say, on that regard, to face the current way of digitalization. as usage in such cases of flight data beyond FDM is not regulated or is not addressed by the regulation except on specific topics, such as you commented for EBT training, each operator decides by themselves how to approach this issue, and this has varying results. Additionally, and regarding the usage of individualized reporting tools, that is showing events, showing flight data to a flight crew on their own flights, this is still a contentious topic. While some operators have already adopted such solutions, flight crew representatives have already raised concerns regarding the potential misuse of the data, particularly if it introduces competitive dynamics between flight crews, etc. So we have two main focuses. The first one is that some of the, let's say, the access policies are not prepared for usage beyond FDM, and the other one that some of the tools that are already being used are facing a lot of resistance.
Okay. And what about integration? At the end, we need to facilitate the work of safety departments of an operator. It is necessary for data to be consistent and available, as I have said previously, across different systems. In the case of FDM, we're speaking about a system that is a part of the SNS safety management system of the operators. And then at the end, what such integration would allow operators to have the full picture. So when monitoring a specific risk, to be able to access FDM data. For instance, to fuse, this has to do with data fusion, specific events with FDM, and as well be able to access within a single tool or single platform to the complete streamline of information. What are the limitations there when it comes to data integration?
Right. So, for example, let's say there are no standardized methods for data integration between software solutions. In particular, between FDM and SMS, there is no established standard. Vendors can try to integrate with other vendors, and that applies to FDM SMS and with any other type of tool that needs to work with flight data. But the market is so fragmented that trying to, let's say, integrate with those solutions is not possible. And the impact of integration with a particular solution is small. So operators end up requesting ad hoc integrations for the solutions that they have, or they try to integrate it themselves through a third-party BI solution, or trying to work themselves with both softwares. Ultimately, integration is dependent on the cost and the complexity, as well as the willingness of the vendors to perform it or to, let's say, help the operator do it itself. For instance, some vendors may offer both FDM and SMS software, and this may, let's say, create some contradictions for the vendor itself if an operator requests to be able to integrate one of its solutions, let's say FDM, with their own SMS. So here we have a small conflict in part of it is a problem technologically, and it is a problem organizational.
Okay. So with this, we conclude the explanation on the limitations. Thank you, Carlos. This is all concerning this brief summary. Again, we have left some things aside due to time constraints. But as you know, and as Nuria has explained, these are just the challenges and limitations we've defined in the context of desk research and one-to-one interviews. I'm sure that there are many more to be captured, and that's why your contribution is so important. Nuria, I'll come back to you for the next steps.
Thank you. Very briefly, and before going to the next steps, we will keep the webinar open 10 additional minutes to be able to answer a bit more of questions, because it took us a bit longer than we expected the whole explanation part. So going back, what's next in our research, as I mentioned before, from this webinar, we would like to have and gather a bit more your feedback on the challenges that we have identified, so on these preliminary results, so that we can have a wider industry opinion, let's say, on the main challenges. And with that, once we have these challenges identified, we will go on the next steps, identifying these potential solutions to these limitations. As mentioned on the questionnaire, when you start filling in, you will already see that we are already starting this conversation, particularly to try to evaluate the impact of the different solutions so that we can recommend those that will actually add more value on our limitations. And finally, as mentioned, we will issue recommendations to EASA to try and help streamlining the adoption of those solutions in the industry. Here you have the QR and the link to the survey, to the questionnaire that we've mentioned. You can scan it now. We will anyhow as well distribute the full presentation to all of you, so you will as well have it on your laptop or on your email soon enough. Please feel free to share as well this questionnaire with your colleagues that might as well be interested on the topic, as we do not expect to limit ourselves the answering of the survey only to those people who could attend the webinar, but anyone on the industry who is familiar with the topic or is working on a daily basis on this topic, okay? And last but not least, let's open the questions and answers. Andrada, Antonio, I don't know if you have already identified some relevant answers on the chat or on the Slido that we can answer. I've seen some conversation already with Andrada for some of the members on the chat.
Check.
Yes, there are a few questions already. There are some on the chat of the WebEx directly. If we can start with that from Charles Forrester. It says, what is EASA doing to address restriction of choice for aircraft operator by some aircraft manufacturers and engine manufacturers for the use of and access to their FDN data? Maybe Guillaume could help with this one.
Not sure I can help a lot on this one. First, I am not sure to understand without any concrete example. But this is typically the kind of feedback that would be useful for the LG team in the questionnaire. So on maybe if I've seen some people are willing to even have interviews to also to explore during interviews.
Okay.
Yes,
Okay,
exactly.
so we will. Yes.
What I would like to highlight here is that we've seen some of these limitations. Some of them will be captured in our report, and now it's the time to, on the one side, you tell us what are those limitations and what is the impact. That's the purpose of the survey, and already start discussing some solutions to progressively adopt regulatory regulations or standards to streamline the resolution of these issues. So please, now what I would like to stress is the importance of filling the survey. And of course, if you are ready and available for an interview or you want to contribute to the research, please share your contact details, and we'll be more than happy to have a chat with you and discuss those.
Thank you. There's another question about the security risks of putting data on the cloud. Are there any? How are they addressed?
Right here, in that case, you must take into account that there is always a risk with the usage of data in any kind of environment. That includes the usage of in-house solutions. Mm-hmm. So in general, when we're talking about cloud, let's say the market is distributed between some very big players, the typical Amazon, Google, and Microsoft, and they already provide a lot of, let's say, of standardized and streamlined security services for the data that they are storing. So in that side, you must always have a very well-defined and very well-executed security practices within your organization to ensure that everything is correctly configured, even if it's in-house, even if it's on the cloud. But we do not see at this point that to be a particular risk maybe on the part of the cloud that may not be existing the part of using an in-house solution.
Yeah.
Most data leakages in many organizations do not come from the technology per se, but come from the human side actually. So this happens with any technology that you have. There's always the possibility of someone actually leaking data, and that is what you need to make sure that doesn't happen with the procedures in place, with the data governance, and with the actual legal and procedural options that you have over the table. But the technology can be made as secure as any other.
You're muted, Andrada.
You're muted, Andrada.
Thank you. Yes, so going to the next one by the order that we've received it. Given the rapid adoption of the artificial intelligence, is it part of the scope? How do we address this in the project?
Yes, concerning adoption of artificial intelligence. This is a topic that we want to address in the 3 different case studies that we are researching here. So for the EVT, for the fuel, and for this one. What we're doing here is, on the one hand, keep an eye on the developments that EASA is doing in the context of AI. For you to know, EASA is right now has issued the concept paper and as well the EASA AI roadmap, the second version. And as well, there are some interesting projects ongoing, research projects, which is the MLEAP, which is providing some basic standards for the future adoption and approval of AI-based systems. So we need to keep an eye on those just to make sure that the standards and solutions that we're proposing in the context of these case studies are aligned with the future developments. And on the other hand, we need to establish the basic standards or touch the basic points when it comes to the adoption of those, let's say, transversal standards to the specific case study. And for those in this research, we are, for instance, making a reflection on how the future identification of events, Carlos has touched upon the knowns and unknowns and so on,
Yeah.
how this could be adopted to enhance the analytical capabilities of operators to identify unknown, let's say, risk situations or hazardous situations beyond the prescriptive identification of events.
Exactly. And here in the case, let's say, of an FDM program, there are specific issues that as Antonio commented, we have to adapt or to address that are specific to the usage of flight data. For example, it is most likely that those capabilities, the usage of artificial intelligence based algorithms, will be developed by either the biggest of the operators or most likely by the software vendors.
Mm-hmm.
And then we will see that there is a set of algorithms to which the operator will probably not have much visibility overall because that is very proprietary technology, but it may become a key, let's say, a key decision-making tool for the operator. So we'll have to see how both the adjustment of AI in the context of flight data is made.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay, thank you, Carlos and Antonio. So Aerobytes are willing to participate, so we will come back to you for sure to see how we can collaborate. And another comment, I think this is related to the security risk that we were mentioning before, that there's an issue where the GDPR isn't aligned between the United States and Europe. So this is something we will take on board as well. Going to the Slido now, there's a question from Captain Roger. Thank you. We have some challenges due to the collection of data using a PCMC AI card. Will you cover those as well within the study? Thank you.
Yes, yes, thank you. We will be covering those topics as well within the report itself. Again, we do not have due to time constraints. We did not have time to cover the topic, but we have already also dealt on the topic of data availability in general. How the fact that the usage of such cards can impact the transmission process of data from the aircraft to the servers by the operator. How that is a problem in terms of performing an FDM program or using flight data for any other usage, which may be even more time critical than an FDM program, the risk of losing flight data, etc. So yes, we will be addressing that topic and we have already covered it. Yes.
Okay, thank you. So this was the last one in here. Maybe we can close now as we are slightly behind the schedule. But just remember, if you have additional questions, and so you can contact us by email, and we will very much appreciate if you can reply the questionnaire. We will share the link to the questionnaire with all the attendees, so no worries about that. And also the presentation and the recording, if you would like to share it with colleagues or people that might be interested in this topic. So coming back to you, John, I think this would be all on our side.
Perfect. Well, thanks very much. I think that, the presentation itself were really interesting, and I know great to have some interaction and questions. So thanks to Guillaume and Andrada and everybody else in the team at ALG. And thanks to everybody who's been involved, and we'll drop an email with all the information once everything's online, probably in the next 48 hours, hopefully. So thanks very much, and I hope you have a great rest of your day and a great week, and we'll sign off now. Thank you. Bye, everybody.
Thank you very much.
Bye. Bye.
Bye.